When I was 12, I cut out a picture of the Eiffel Tower from a calendar and taped it to the inside of my closet door. I told myself one day, I'd stand right there, with the wind in my hair, holding a warm croissant, smiling like the girls in those old movies my mom loved. That image lived with me longer than most friendships. So when my parents started talking about a family trip to Paris earlier this year, I let myself believe, just this once, that the promise would hold. At dinner last Tuesday, we were all at the table. The rare kind of evening where no one had excuses or places to be. Mom had made roast chicken, the dry kind she insisted was lean and healthy. I brought it up between bites, casually, like I wasn't waiting on it for weeks. So, are we still going to Paris in May? Dad didn't even look up. Trip's cancelled, he muttered. We can't afford it anymore. The sound of silverware tapping plates seemed louder than usual. I glanced around, no one said a word. Not my sister, not my brother. Mom just kept cutting her chicken. Like someone had pulled the plug on a dream and no one noticed the water draining. I laughed, nervously. Wait, what? But we booked months ago, didn't we? Things change, Mom said flatly. It's not the right time. And just like that, the silence settled in. I nodded, said okay, and chewed even though my mouth had gone dry. My sister shrugged. It's just a trip, she whispered. I smiled through it. I always did. But something about that moment, it hit different. Maybe it was the way no one met my eyes. Or how quickly they moved on to talking about lawn work, as if Paris had never existed. Later that night, I walked past the living room shelf and noticed something missing. The snow globe. My Paris snow globe, the one with the tiny Eiffel Tower inside, the one I'd had since high school. It used to sit between the family photo and the holiday nutcracker. Now it was gone. I didn't ask. The next 2 days felt off. There were low conversations behind closed doors. I caught my brother whispering on the phone. My sister kept dodging my questions. And when I asked Mom if she'd seen my snow globe, she said maybe I'd packed it away. I started to second-guess myself. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe the trip was never solid. Maybe I'd read too much into things again. But then again, that was always the cycle, wasn't it? I would question, and they'd deflect. I'd get hurt, and they'd say I was too sensitive. I was always the one making things a big deal. At work 2 days later, I sat eating lunch at my desk. I pulled out my phone to scroll through social media, needing a break from emails. That's when I saw it. My sister's post. A selfie in front of the Eiffel Tower. Mom and Dad standing next to her, all of them smiling like the last 2 days hadn't happened. Caption, finally made it. Dream trip with the people I love most. My thumb froze mid-scroll. My sandwich went cold in my hand. I stared at the screen, blinking, as if the image would change. They went. They actually went. I got up, walked straight to the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the closed toilet seat. I didn't cry, not at first. Just sat there, hands trembling, trying to piece it together. Then the tears came, not loud, just hot and sharp. I pressed the heel of my palm against my eyes like it would stop my face from burning. I didn't call. I didn't text. I just sat there thinking, how long did they plan this? How many conversations had happened without me? How many people knew? Because it wasn't a last-minute thing. I saw the tags, the comments. My aunt from Boston had liked the post. My cousin had commented, "So glad you finally made it." They'd all known. They'd smiled, packed, flown, and posed, all while I sat at home, wondering what I'd done wrong. I scrolled through every photo, every update. Each one felt like a stone in my gut. This wasn't just forgetting. This was erasure. And the worst part? I wasn't surprised. That night, I went home and sat on the couch. I stared at the shelf, the empty space where the snow globe used to be. I said out loud, they didn't forget me. They chose to erase me. I opened my laptop. Started typing an email to Mom. I got halfway through. Then I stopped. Not yet. I walked to the shelf, ran my finger across the dust line where the globe used to sit. It was stupid, maybe. Just a trinket. But to me, it was proof. That they knew. That they took it. That I was never going to Paris. 3 days passed. Not a word from anyone. No message. No call. Not even a mention from the people who'd posted smiling faces under the Eiffel Tower like it was just another Sunday. Then it came. A cheerful group text from Celeste. Hope everyone's ready for Sunday dinner. Mom's making pot roast. I stared at the message for a full minute. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Like Paris hadn't happened. Like I hadn't seen it. The pit in my stomach tightened. Did they think I hadn't seen the photos? Or worse, did they think I'd stay quiet, pretend I hadn't? My thumb hovered over the reply button, but I didn't type anything. Silence felt safer. Sharper, even. Instead, I went to my closet and pulled out the cream blouse I'd bought for Paris, light, linen, with a delicate neckline. I wore it anyway. Maybe they wouldn't notice. But I would. And that was enough. That afternoon, I opened a fresh journal. Something about putting ink to paper made it real. I wrote everything, word for word, how they canceled the trip with no explanation, then showed up in Paris like I'd never existed. I even included the caption on Celeste's post. Every word. Every detail. Later, as I drove to dinner, I repeated one question to myself. If they act like nothing happened, does that make it less real? The driveway was packed when I pulled up. Same brick house, same flower pots by the steps. But it felt unfamiliar, like walking into someone else's story. Inside, it smelled like rosemary and pot roast. Everyone was already there, laughing. Celeste was showing Dad something on her phone. My brother poured wine into stemless glasses. No one looked surprised to see me. No one looked guilty. I hung my jacket and walked into the dining room. The table was set with new napkins, white, stitched with tiny Eiffel Towers. Imported, no doubt. Paris souvenirs tucked right into the family routine. Hey you, Mom said with a smile, creme brulee for dessert. You always loved that. I sat down across from her and smiled back. I did. The conversation floated around me. Art galleries, pastries, how crowded the Louvre was, how charming the streets were in Montmartre. They talked like they'd just returned from a business trip. Not one mention of me. Not one slip. My hands rested on my lap. I looked around and thought, did they all agree to pretend I didn't exist that week? I picked up a napkin and rubbed it between my fingers. Soft. Delicate. Souvenir silence. Halfway through dinner, I put down my fork and asked, so how was Paris? It landed like a thud on the table. For half a second, no one spoke. Then Celeste laughed, too quickly. Oh! It was last minute. We weren't even sure we'd go until the night before. Mom nodded. And we didn't want to stress you out. You've been so busy lately, haven't you? They twisted it, just like that. From exclusion to concern. From betrayal to care. They made it my fault. I looked around. Not one of them held my gaze. My brother busied himself with his glass. Dad cleared his throat. They didn't flinch. They'd rehearsed this, maybe not aloud, but together. That's when I realized gaslighting doesn't always come from cruelty. Sometimes it comes from cowardice. From shame they don't want to name. It's like being erased in high definition. I smiled. I nodded. I even helped clear the dishes. Later that night, lying in bed, I pulled up the emails, confirmation of the trip, my name on the reservation. Every message, every receipt. I took screenshots. Printed them out. Slipped them into a folder under my bed. They wanted to rewrite it. But I wasn't going to let them. I picked up my journal. On the inside cover, I wrote a single word as the password, verite. Truth. I didn't know what I would do yet. But I knew this much, I wouldn't forgive easily. And for the first time, I didn't see us as a family anymore. I saw them. I drove to their house the next morning, a pie dish tucked under my arm, telling myself it was just a gesture, but inside I knew I needed to see it. When I walked in, the air smelled like roasted vegetables and old furniture. Mom met me in the foyer, a polite smile in place. She offered a tote bag. We got you something from Paris. I forced a nod and stepped inside. I opened the bag slowly, pretending surprise. Inside was a cheap Eiffel Tower keychain, tin, dull, and a stack of paper napkins. I touched the napkin, its design matching the ones from dinner night before. It felt deliberate. We stood there in that living room, me with my gift, them watching. Flashback, I'd seen Celeste open a silk scarf, a leather wallet, genuine Paris souvenirs. I remembered Dad handing her a perfume box. I remembered Mom's eyes lighting up. I remembered being told, years back, we'll get you something better someday. It never came. I said nothing. They waited for my reaction. The bag felt heavier in my hand than it had looked. I returned the pie dish without comment, slipping the keychain back inside the tote and walking out. I called Selah later, meeting her at the cafe on Main Street. I slid the tote on the table, pulled out my phone. Look at this, I said quietly. She looked up and said, wait, they told you it was cancelled? Her voice cracked a little. She took the napkins in her hands, flipped them slowly, like measuring each insult. This is erasure, she said. They edited you out of your own life. I showed her screenshots, my name on booking confirmations, texts about which museum we would visit, budget breakdowns. She frowned, leaned forward. I didn't think people did that to family, she whispered. I shrugged. They didn't think they were doing much. She quoted Maya Angelou. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Her eyes held me then, like she was seeing me anew. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment. I could hear the hum of wind through the blinds. I replayed the Sunday dinner like illegal depositions. I saw Celeste joke about eating snails in France, how the image made everyone laugh. I saw my father glance at me like I was a stranger stepping in. I remembered Mom turning away when I looked at the screen she shared. Microaggressions that now felt like nails. It wasn't innocence. It was dismissal. It was orchestrated. I opened my laptop. I began drafting a letter, one I might never send. I wrote promises they made, times I believed in their words. I included what they said afterward. What remains unsaid? I wrote lines like, "You aren't required to explain. But you are responsible for your silence." I pushed harder. I crafted sentences, not pleading, but clear. Not angry, but resolute. I didn't write for apology. I wrote for clarity. I ended the letter with a line, "I wasn't mad you went to Paris. I was mad you came back pretending I never existed." I closed the document. The napkins sat on my desk, faint smell of linen in the air. I stared at them, at the image stitched into cotton, and I knew this story was no longer just mine. Nights were becoming harder to sleep through. I found myself sitting at the edge of my bed, scrolling through old folders I hadn't opened in years. It wasn't enough anymore to simply feel wronged, I needed to see it, in writing, black and white, no room for doubt. I opened my email history, the one I almost deleted out of shame after the Paris photos. There, buried beneath months of work newsletters, was the itinerary. My name. My seat assignment. My hotel check-in. Everything was still booked. No cancellation notice. I clicked through dates, times, flight numbers. The payment had cleared. The reservation had been held. Someone had gone into those plans and quietly removed me, leaving the logistics intact so it looked like I had never been part of it. My chest tightened, not in sadness, but in clarity. They didn't cancel my trip. They canceled me. I closed everything, sat very still, palms flat against my thighs. There it was, the difference between pain and proof. The next afternoon, I drove to my parents' house again. I didn't go inside, just stood in the doorway long enough to make polite conversation. The television was on low in the background, Celeste's live stream replay from Paris. Laughter echoed from the screen. I caught a glimpse of the Eiffel Tower behind them, the very moment they toasted. But when I looked closer, I noticed something off, a section of the video blurred, muted. Like a segment had been trimmed. I took a step forward. "What happened there?" I asked. My brother shrugged. "Probably a glitch." I didn't believe it. I had seen that moment before in a repost someone else shared. I remembered Celeste turning to someone off camera. Someone who must have been me. "Why did you block part of it?" I pressed, my tone even. Celeste chuckled, dismissing it. "You're reading into nothing. Don't be dramatic." Dramatic. The word landed like a slap. It was their favorite deflection, paint me unreasonable before I could speak. I didn't say another word. I stood there, letting the noise of their conversation pass over me like wind. I realized I could shout until my throat tore, and they would still hear nothing. They had decided I was the problem, and once a story is set, truth has no place. When I returned home that evening, I sat in front of the mirror. Not to cry, those tears had passed. I looked at myself and asked, "Are you going to let them do this?" Silence answered back, but it wasn't weakness. It was choice. I wasn't ready to confront them, not with rage, not with begging. I wanted to confront them with facts they couldn't bury. I opened a folder on my desktop and renamed it, Record. Inside, I saved the itinerary, the screenshots, even the blurred frame of Celeste's video. Not revenge. Record. Before bed, I attempted to write to Celeste, "Stop erasing me online and offline." I typed it. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. I knew sending it would only serve them, another chance to call me unhinged. My phone buzzed. A notification. For half a second, I thought someone had reached out, maybe even acknowledged me. But no, it was Celeste, posting another reel from Paris, captioned, "Family is everything." I closed my eyes. That night, I stood at my bathroom sink, water running, my face in my hands. I whispered to my own reflection, "I will not vanish quietly." And for the first time, I believed it. Not as a wish. As a warning. They erased me from their memories. They erased me from their screens. But I was not gone. I woke up with that kind of exhaustion that lives behind your eyes. Not the kind a nap fixes. This was heavier. Like something had settled on my chest overnight and decided to stay. I stared at the ceiling for a long time before I made myself sit up. Shower. Get up. Do something. Even ghosts clean themselves, I guess. I stood under the hot water, letting it burn just enough to remind me I still had skin. My thoughts drifted to the blocked video, to the napkins, to that bag of cheap souvenirs like a pat on the head. Back in the kitchen, I checked the group chat again. Still no new messages. No one had followed up. No "how are you," no mention of Paris, no anything. The silence was surgical. I pulled up Celeste's livestream replay again. Paused at the moment my name was supposed to be said. Watched their faces. My brother laughing too loudly. My mother looking over her shoulder. Not a trace of guilt. Just people enjoying a story that didn't include me. By late morning, I was walking into Dr. Field's office like I was walking underwater. She greeted me with that gentle smile she always had. I didn't sit right away. Just stood there. "You okay to talk today?" she asked. I sat. And I talked. All of it. The Facebook post. The deleted footage. The paper bag with a keychain. The way they acted like none of it had happened. Like I'd imagined it. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she sat back and said, "You've described textbook emotional displacement." I looked at her like she'd said something in code. What does that mean? It means they've pushed their guilt onto you. Rewritten events so you carry the shame for their actions. I shook my head. But why would all of them agree to pretend like this? Dr. Fields didn't hesitate. Because you were never supposed to question it. You were supposed to accept it and smile. That was the moment I felt something shift. Not like a crack or a snap. More like a hinge loosening. She encouraged me to write a letter, not for them, for me. Get it out. Put the truth somewhere real. That night, back home, I sat down at my desk and pulled up the screenshot of my itinerary. I stared at it for a while. Then I sent it to Celeste. No caption. A few minutes later, she replied. "You really need to stop reading into things. You're just too sensitive." That did it. That line. I'd heard it before. Too sensitive. I could hear it in my mother's voice, sharp and polished. "Don't be so dramatic." Or from my father, "You always take things the wrong way." But it was Celeste who'd turned it into a blade. I was 16 the first time she used it. She had planned a birthday dinner, just us girls, and then uninvited me last minute. Said she forgot. I walked into the restaurant anyway, saw them all there. She smiled and said, "Oh, don't be so sensitive." Like the lie hadn't happened. I didn't cry this time. I sat still, phone in hand, jaw locked. The sting was there, but it was different now. clearer, focused. They trained me to doubt myself, I said out loud. But I'm unlearning now. I reached for a pen and wrote the words "too sensitive" on a sticky note. Pinned it above my desk. Not as a wound. As evidence. A reminder of the language they used to keep me small. Then I opened a fresh document and began typing the letter. I didn't hold back. I wrote every memory they rewrote. Every time I was erased. Every moment I was made to feel like I'd made it all up. I didn't write it for them. I wrote it to reclaim my voice. At the end, I signed it, "You taught me not to speak. Now I'm learning to roar." I saved it into the folder I had already named days before, The Reckoning. I didn't know when I'd use it. But I would. They don't see it yet, but this silence is the last they'll ever get from me. Friday arrived slower than a heartbreak. I woke early and pulled out my evidence folder, flight confirmations, screenshots, the blurred segment of Celeste's video. I felt steady. If I crumbled now, they win. So I dared myself to document instead. I printed the timeline, Paris plans, text threads, the post date, and payment records. Each line traced their omissions. In group photos, I noticed I was cropped. In emails, replies went unanswered. Every exclusion, every detail, I aligned it side by side. I dressed carefully that evening, navy blouse, sharp jeans. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted presence. Dinner was quiet at first. I entered the room calmly, put my folder near my plate, and sat. My siblings exchanged glances. The aroma of roasted vegetables lingered. We ate. I waited. Then dessert came, vanilla crème brûlée, my favorite. After the last spoonful, I cleared my throat and placed the folder on the table. I have questions, I said. This is not a misunderstanding. Silence roared. My brother dropped his fork. Celeste looked away. Dad paused mid-sip. My mother pursed her lips. Their faces flickered. Shock settled like dust. Celeste opened the top sheet and frowned. This isn't how it looks, she claimed. I leaned across the table. You edited me out of your video. My tickets were active. What does it look like to you? I said softly but firmly. Mom sighed, tired but practiced. Why are you trying to tear this family apart? I saw it, old patterns repeating. The blame. The dismissal. The role I'd been handed many times before when I tried to ask questions. I shook my head. You don't get to twist my reality now, I said. I'm done being erased. I pushed the folder, stood up, and walked out. I left behind the looks, the accusations, the condoning silence. I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I simply stepped away. Back home, I went to my fireplace. One printed photo, one small souvenir image from their Paris trip, caught my eye. I lit a match, held it steady, and watched it burn. I turned the ashes into a glass jar. A boundary. Evidence of what had been willingly discarded. That night, I didn't cry. Instead, I paced by the window, staring out into darkness. In that silence, a new plan formed. What would come next? What I would show. What I would no longer let slip. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, tonight, I begin. I parked down the block and walked up to the front door, holding my evidence folder like a shield. My heart pounded behind my ribs, but I kept my face calm. This night, I would face them. Inside, I heard laughter, voices mingling, the soft clink of glasses. Familiar scene, unfamiliar world. I stepped into the living room and placed my folder on the dining table. They noticed then. Celeste froze mid-sentence, Mom paused mid-serve. I cleared my throat. We need to talk, I said, voice steady. They gathered. Nervous tension crackled between us. I stood there, letting seconds stretch. This was my hesitation moment, and I overtook it. I read aloud an email I had sent to extended family and close friends. I didn't skip details, the timeline, the confirmations, the receipts. I explained plainly, I was never cancelled. I was erased. Gasps spread through the room like wildfire. Cousin looked shocked. Aunt clutched her phone. Celeste tried to interrupt, that's not fair, but I cut in, firm, you won't silence me now. I watched her eyes narrow, watched others shift. Phones came out as people tried to follow along. Then Celeste slammed down a folder of her own. Here's your problem, she said coldly. This document gives me power over your assets. I picked it up. My voice clipped. What document is that? Inside was a forged power of attorney, my name, her authority. My chest hitched. They weren't simply hiding. They planned this. The room erupted. Voices crashed over each other. My mother demanded calm. My father tried to palliate. I demanded truth. You forged that? You put your signature next to mine? Celeste's face softened, as though forgive me was a passive feature. You were never going to act, she said. I realized then how deep this went. They had plotted while I was naive, thinking love was protection. They gambled with memory, with trust, bet I'd never rise to demand answers. I stood. You thought I'd be silent forever. But you forged my life, not my voice. I peeled off my jacket, slammed the folder on the table. I told them I was seeking legal recourse and I'd publish everything. I grabbed the napkin from Paris, that symbol I'd kept tucked away, and held it in front of them. My voice cracked only once, I'm done hiding. I turned and walked out, leaving stunned faces in the quiet house. I didn't linger. I didn't look back. I walked to my car and drove home under a cloudy sky. Once inside, I pulled out one of the printed photos from their Paris trip. I lit a match to it. The corners curled, blackened, then folded inward. I held the ashes in a glass jar, our photo, reduced. A boundary drawn in flame. That night, I didn't cry. I planned. What comes next? What I would show. What I would no longer let them erase. They say I'm making trouble, but I'm just telling the story they tried so hard to erase. Morning light filtered through the blinds and I lay in bed, replaying every moment from last night's stand. My voice still felt raw in my throat. No calls. No messages. Total silence. The house seemed further away now, emotionally, physically. I scanned my phone again, then opened my laptop. Checking email, scanning social platforms. That's when I saw it, a post someone I didn't know had shared, referencing my email and claims. They had distorted a line, but the bones were mine. They were telling my story without asking me first. My heart began to lift. Later that morning, a message came through. Jane. She wrote, your family did to you what mine did to me. Jane had been a distant acquaintance in college, we barely kept touch. But reading her message, I felt wound and wound link. She said she'd seen the post and recognized the ache. We messaged back and forth, hours of unspoken relief pouring out. She told me how she was shut out, how she was gaslit. I told her I knew that pain intimately. We agreed to meet. That afternoon, I walked into a quiet cafe. Jane sat in a corner booth, watching the door. I slid across and we held hands for a moment, two people who weren't strangers anymore. She told me her story, I told mine. She said something that made me flush, "You're not alone. And telling your truth gives oxygen to so many wounds." I hesitated. What if I make this worse? She smiled, steady as oak, or what if you finally make it stop? We raised our coffee cups. To stories that deserve oxygen, she said. I nodded. Our cups clicked softly. Back home, I opened a blank document and began writing. Detailed it all, the photo, the lies, the fake documents, the silences. I changed names where I needed. But I didn't soften the edges. It was still my story. At the end, I typed, "This isn't revenge. It's release." I paused. Then I hit upload. Closed the window. Did not refresh. Did not watch the metrics. I settled at my desk and whispered, "Let it land where it needs to." And for the first time, I felt light. Not free yet, but not hiding. The story was finally out, and now, all I could do was wait for who would hear it. A week had passed since I published the blog post. I hadn't expected anything. Not praise, not backlash, not recognition. But the silence I'd lived in cracked wide open. That morning, I woke up to an inbox that just wouldn't stop refreshing. Hundreds of messages, some short, some pages long. Stories. Confessions. Questions. Anger. Gratitude. Pain. I read slowly, like I was handling something delicate. Some people told me they saw their own family in mine. Others just said, "Thank you." There were a few nasty ones too. But even those didn't rattle me. Because something had shifted. I didn't feel invisible anymore. And then I saw it, one message I had to read twice to believe. Ray. My uncle. Dad's younger brother. The one who always stayed on the edges, kept his opinions tucked in his back pocket. His message was simple, I saw everything. I should have stood up years ago. I'm sorry. The next day, we met on the old beachside path a few miles down the coast. I didn't plan it. He'd suggested it, and for some reason, I didn't hesitate. I hadn't seen him in nearly 3 years. He looked tired, but his eyes met mine without flinching. We walked side by side. He didn't try to hug me, didn't fill the air with noise. Just started talking. Said he'd seen the Paris photo. Said Celeste had sent it to him before the trip, "Look who's not coming," with a laugh. He hadn't responded then. And he hadn't called me afterward either. I distanced myself, he said, voice low. Told myself I was neutral. But truth is, I was afraid. Afraid to stir it up. Afraid to lose the little ground I had. I didn't interrupt. I didn't nod or shake my head. I just let the words land where they needed to. I let fear keep me small, he said. You didn't. We kept walking after that. No need to fix it. Just walk. The sound of waves took over. And for once, silence wasn't avoidance, it was respect. Back at home, I sat with all of it. Not just Ray's words, but the avalanche of stories from strangers. I thought about healing, and how it's not about forgiveness, not always. It's about deciding what to keep, what to let go. And who to become without the weight. I started packing. Not in a rush, not with anger. I opened drawers, looked at old cards, keepsakes. Some went in boxes, some in the trash. But I didn't touch the framed napkin from Paris. That stayed on the wall. Not for nostalgia, but as a reminder. I wrote one last post. Moving forward is not forgetting. It's reclaiming the direction. That evening, I booked a writer's retreat upstate. Quiet. Isolated. Not Paris. No one to impress. Just a place to be. I packed light this time. And not just the suitcase, my chest felt lighter too. I turned off the lights in my apartment and stood at the door for a second. Then whispered, "This is mine now." The past still existed. It hadn't vanished. But it no longer had the final word. And for the first time in years, I wasn't running from something, I was walking toward it.